Hi everyone, I hope you've had a lovely day and now time to relax with the next part of our story. So if you remember correctly, Joe has just made a speech in front of everyone about what he would do if he was Prime Minister and how he would run the country. So let's see what happens next. We are at this bit down here. And just like that, Joe had finished, as though he'd suddenly run out of batteries. He looked around to see that everyone was staring at him, open-mouthed. What seemed brilliant only a few seconds ago felt so silly now. What was he thinking? His cheeks began to flush pink with embarrassment. Suddenly, there was a slapping sound. And then another. It sounded like... No, not sounded like. It was. Clapping. He was being applauded. "You tell them, son," said one man. "We need a few more like you in charge." The applause grew louder and louder. Joe looked at AJ. AJ looked at Joe and mouthed the words, "Wow," at him. He was stunned, but not as stunned as Joe. Percival T. Duckholm snorted like a pig and stormed back into his car, yelling at the driver. "Take me back now. Upstaged by a little child. I'll never hear the end of this." Charlie James, the TV reporter, said something to his cameraman and then turned to Joe. "That was, like totally just, well, you know." What the heck was that supposed to mean? The TV crew whispered a few more words to each other before making a hasty exit. Suddenly, the realization of what Joe had done hit him like a wave of icy water. "Do you think Mr. Brooks will be mad?" Joe asked AJ nervously. "What? That you just called the Prime Minister a dafty on TV?" "I think we're about to find out," AJ replied. Mr. Brooks was running after the car, banging on the window, begging Percival not to leave. And that's when Joe's eyes met Violetta Crump. She was staring at him from the limo. She didn't blink. She didn't shout. She just stared at him. Joe felt his spine tingle like it was made of ice-cold jelly. He grabbed his bag and headed for school, trying to look inconspicuous. The crowd parted as he walked on through the school doors down towards his classroom. Maybe it will all blow over, thought Joe as he waited for AJ to catch him up. And that's when he sensed it, like a deep rumble of a far-away train. A ball of anger so huge that it could be felt before it was heard. Then, like a furious belch, it hurtled out of Mr. Brooks' mouth at 100 miles per hour. "Perkins! My office! No!" "Whoa, that was quick," said AJ, tapping his watch. Joe and AJ sat in Mr. Brooks' office. They were so nervous that they could barely look at each other, let alone speak. Mr. Brooks bounded in, slamming the door behind him. "I might have known it to be you two," he sneered. "It's always you two." Before Mr. Brooks could utter a word of the speech he'd clearly been planning in his head, the phone started ringing. Mr. Brooks picked it up and slammed it down without answering. Joe gulped. "Mr. Brooks," AJ started. "I just wanted to say, sorry, I shouldn't have..." He stopped mid-sentence and scratched his head. "Hang on. I haven't done anything. Why am I here?" "Oh, you'll be involved somewhere. You always are," Mr. Brooks hissed. The phone rang again. Mr. Brooks picked it up and hung up once more without even looking away from Joe and AJ. He was just about to start yelling again when his mobile started ringing. "Oh, for goodness sake," he said, switching it off. "Have you two any idea how important today was? Our school could have been famous. Do you know what that could mean?" "New school books?" Joe asked. "Eh?" Mr. Brooks replied, with a note of surprise. Think big, lad. Wouldn't it be great if the school had a new PE block or perhaps a new swimming pool? I was going to ask the Prime Minister for his help. I just wanted him to listen about the park, Joe began. Imagine it, Perkins. Imagine a world where the school had a private swimming pool, only open to a very select bunch of people. Know what I mean? He said, tapping his nose. You mean the children? Asked AJ. Well, okay. Some of the children. The clean ones, perhaps. Maybe the kind of children who mention that their school needs a swimming pool on TV. Not the kind who call the bloomin' Prime Minister a dafty and go on about parks. But he is a dafty, Joe protested. I know that. They all are. But that's not the point. Oh, I understand, Joe said, not really understanding. Nothing too fancy. Just one with one of those water slides and maybe a waterfall. Mr. Brooks was still in a daydream, fantasizing about swimming pools. Oh, and I like those steam rooms. And a hot tub. But then you two blew it. Once again, Mr. Brooks, totally innocent here, said AJ, holding up his hands. Then AJ's phone started to ring. Uh-oh, AJ gasped. It's for emergencies only. I never have it on during class. Hand over the phone, boy. AJ grabbed his phone and went to give it to Mr. Brooks. Oh my good crikey, he yelled, staring at the screen. You're not going to like this, Mr. Brooks. Just then, Miss Jones, the school secretary, burst in. Why aren't you answering the phone? She cried. The whole place has gone berserk, trying to get hold of you. I've got people from all over the world on the phone through there. All over the world? Mr. Brooks' eyes lit up. Wanting to talk to me? No. They want Joe. Me? Why? Joe asked, confused. You've gone viral, AJ said, handing over his phone to Joe and Mr. Brooks. Look. Chapter 3. Fame. Viral? Am I ill? Joe said with panic in his voice. Is it serious? No. Viral as in... Oh, just watch. AJ clicked the button on his phone and it began to play. It took Joe a second or two to realise what he was looking at, but then he made out a face. It was... Yes. There was no mistaking it. It was his face. What the... What? It's me? My nan in Mumbai just sent it to me, AJ said excitedly. Joe was dumbstruck. His speech was being replayed before his eyes. He'd only said it for half an hour ago, and already he was being watched around the world. He buried his face in his hands. He'd made a fool of himself, and now the whole world was watching. Joe took a peek through his fingers, expecting AJ to be as horrified and as embarrassed as him. But he was smiling. I mean, proper big smiles. His mate was enjoying it. This could be big for us, Joe. We could be millionaires, said AJ. Look how many people have watched it. Mr. Brooks grabbed the phone. 150,000 hits, he screamed. Don't be ridiculous, Mr. Brooks, snapped AJ. Oh, phew, Joe sighed. That's 1.5 million hits, AJ grinned. It took Joe a moment to register what AJ had said. What? 1.5 million? AJ finished off his sentence for him, grinning like the cat not only had found the cream, but had stumbled across his own dairy. I mean, I know at least 5 of them have been my nan. Look. And you can see my nose in the background, but 1.5 million, man! Joe, are you listening to me? But Joe wasn't listening. He was feeling very peculiar. He sat down on the floor as if suddenly weighed down. It had taken all his nerve to say something to Prime Minister in the first place, and now it had gone global. He didn't want any of this. He just wanted to stop the park from being closed and for his mum to keep her job. "You're not going to throw up, are you?" Mr. Brooks said, wincing. "I don't want you throwing up in here." Joe said. It was all he could manage. "I know that noise. It's a throwy up kind of noise," Mr. Brooks said. "Well, perhaps if you stopped mentioning the word," AJ said crossly, "he might not, throw up?" Mr. Brooks said. "Amazing," AJ sighed. AJ sat next to Joe and put his arm around him. Okay, we're going to stop there again for today. I'm enjoying this book so far. I wonder what's going to happen next. So see you tomorrow on Zoom, and I will see you tomorrow for the next part of the story. Bye.